cold March day in 1900, Charles Allen, an umbrella repairman, was riding the 435 trolley up Central Avenue toward Somersworth. As the trolley passed by the Wentworth Hospital, Allen looked out the window at a nearby billboard, still surrounded by the winter's snow. It was then that he heard what sounded like the faint cry of a baby outside. He yelled for the conductor to stop the trolley, and he and another passenger, Sam Smalley, hopped off and ran toward the billboard. Behind the billboard, they discovered a baby nearly buried in the snow. The baby was crying, but clearly starting to fade. Allen picked up the infant, a baby boy, and noticed he was covered in scratches and cuts, most likely from being thrown hastily in the snowbank. The baby was only wearing a thin petticoat and was clearly suffering from the cold weather. Nearby, Sam Smalley found a white flannel blanket and a newly made cloak, which seemed to have been as hastily tossed aside. Charles Allen and Sam Smalley swaddled the baby in the clothing, jumped back on the trolley, and told the conductor to make haste to downtown Dover. Once there, they immediately went to the police station. The baby was handed over to the police chief, Marshal Fogarty, who promptly brought the infant to Dr. John Ham's home. The doctor immediately began to treat and care for the baby. And Marshal Fogarty launched an investigation into what was being called, quote, one of the most fiendish attempts at murder ever perpetrated in Dover. Thanks to Dr. Ham, the baby seemed to improve and was placed in the care of Ann Kay. Police had already fanned out and interviewed dozens of people and potential witnesses. Their first break was a conversation with Charles Cate, who said he saw a woman who appeared to be 25 years old walking up Central Avenue toward the hospital around 4 o'clock that day. She was wearing a dark skirt and a black golf cape trimmed with red, and she was carrying a baby. A Dover resident, William Foy, who lived across the street from the hospital, also told police he saw the woman carrying a baby. He said she was acting strange as she walked toward Somersworth. He saw her again walking back into town, but this time with no baby. It wasn't long before police had talked to more than 20 witnesses who saw the woman and baby. As the investigation continued, Mrs. Kay said the baby boy, who was about 6 weeks old, was improving and expected to recover. The baby's future, though, was uncertain. Without parents, the baby would be placed in the care of the county commissioners. By the next day, police had another break in the case. They discovered that the woman and baby had arrived in Dover on train 59 on the afternoon of the crime. The train's brakeman told police the woman and her baby had been seated near the front of the train. He said he thought they had come from Newmarket. The county sheriff, who was also investigating, went to Durham and Newmarket to interview people who he expected would help identify the woman. And in the next few days, the police had done just that. Just 2 days after the baby was discovered, police arrested Mary Fredette and her husband William at their apartment above Dover Grocery on Washington Street, where they lived with William's parents. Both William and Mary were placed in the same cell at the Dover police station. After questioning the couple, and following a number of additional interviews with other people, police learned that on January 18th of that same year, Mary Fredette, who was then Mary Marlowe of Newmarket, came to Dover with her father to ask that police arrest William Fredette with bastardy. Mary said she was carrying William's unborn child. William told police at that time that he was indeed the father, and to avoid charges, he and Mary requested a marriage certificate at Dover City Hall the following day, on January 19th. Instead of William, though, the marriage certificate was in the name of John Fredette and Mary Marlowe. 2 days after that, the two were wed at a ceremony in Newmarket. Police went to Mary's home in Newmarket, where she had delivered the baby on February 14th of that year. The baby was not there, and police then knew for certain this was the same Mary who had demanded William's arrest in January. Police then learned that William would later tell Mary that the child was not his and that she, quote, needed to get rid of it. He would tell police that he never meant for her to toss it away, but instead find a relative who would take the child. He said the boy's name was Dalphé Maylott. William said he hadn't seen Mary since February, when she went to her parents' home to give birth. She hadn't returned until March 10th, when she boarded the train with the baby. That was the same day she left the baby behind the billboard on Central Avenue. Mary Fredette was charged with assault with intent to murder. At her arraignment on March 13th, Mary Fredette could not stop crying. According to news accounts, she kept a handkerchief to her face the entire time. Charges against William were dropped. Mary was confined to the county jail until her next appearance in court at the end of March. Days after the baby boy was placed in the care of Mrs. K, the baby's condition took a turn for the worse, which doctors said was likely due to the trauma of nearly freezing to death. The baby was then said to be in critical condition, but a week later was said to be finally on his way to recovery. Mary would remain in the jail for the next 7 months. She was indicted by a grand jury in September of that year and would be found guilty and sentenced to additional jail time. There is little mention of William, Mary, and the baby boy after that. According to state records, Mary and William were divorced in 1911. The divorce decree cites the reason as adultery. We can only hope that the baby boy who nearly died in Dover on that cold March day in 1900 went on to lead a happy life.